Well. Clemson Tiger fans, college football fans, welcome back to another episode of the All In Show right here on the Voice of College Football Clemson channel. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm, as always, your host, Tiger Paul Craven. Jordan Bowman will be joining us a little bit later in the show. He's going to be a few minutes late tonight, so we're going to go ahead and get kicked off with the show. I'm going to respond to a few of your guys' comments and questions and all of that, and then we will get into tonight's show. So it'll be a little bit different format tonight, but we'll get there and we'll get you a great show out tonight. We're going to talk a ton of stuff tonight. We're going to talk EA Sports College Football 25. We're going to talk recruiting. We're going to talk Clemson Media Days. We got a chance to hear from all of the Clemson coaches this past week. About their thoughts on fall camp, about their thoughts on the upcoming season and where we are from a personnel standpoint, where we are from a preparation standpoint, and what still needs to be done prior to the upcoming August 31st kickoff against the Georgia Bulldogs. So we got a ton of stuff to talk about that, and we'll get to that momentarily. But before we get into tonight's show, and before I start chopping up with you guys in the comment section, if you are not subscribed to the channel, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button for us. Really helps us out. Also, hit that like button. This is a live video, as you guys know, and those likes really help us out on these live videos, and that helps us grow the channel as well. And all of that help that you guys give us is greatly appreciated. And then last but not least, certainly, you can also hit that super chat feature, help support what me and Jordan do here on the All In Show, and help support the voice of college football in general, and that would be greatly appreciated as well. And with all of that said, I'm going to get into the comment section, guys. I'm going to talk to you guys for a little bit and hang out with you guys until Jordan pops in, and then we are going to get started with the show. So a little bit different format. We're going to go to the questions first, and then we'll go to our planned portion of the show a little bit later. So kind of reverse action for you guys there. But nonetheless, a great show for you guys. We got 16 people in the live chat right now, so thank you guys so much for showing up. Appreciate you guys. We got Jackson Johnson in the live chat right now. He says, "What's up, Clemson Tiger Nation? What's up, man? Thanks so much for being here." One of our great moderators here always plugs all the information that we need for you guys to help us grow as a channel and help support the voice of college football as well. So thank you, Jackson, for being here. Vin Villalobos is in here. Hey, excited for the show. Thanks for stopping by, man. Appreciate you. Connor Johnson says, "Hey, guys, been a minute. Curious as to what the Clemson fan perspective with all the realignment talk is. I know they filed a lawsuit too, but it seems like FSU is way more antsy to get out. Just speculation." I think there's probably some truth, Connor, to what you're kind of saying there about FSU being more antsy. I don't know if antsy is the term that I would use to describe how Florida State is doing it. They are just, make no mistake, Clemson and Florida State both equally want out of the ACC. They want to get out of this conference. They want to cut ties and move on and try to create a better financial situation for their universities long term. Now, that may come with some hits short term. Obviously, there's going to be probably some sort of agreement reached to eventually somewhere down the road, whether that be a year from now or whether that be however long from now, with the ACC and Clemson and probably FSU as well, and maybe even other universities that are currently in the conference. Who knows? So that's going to come with some immediate financial setbacks, but the hope is for both those universities is to pay that money, then move on and create stability as far as finances go and what conference you belong to for the future. And as far as my perspective on the realignment, I wish we never really got here. Personally, as a college football fan, I wish the realignment stuff never really caught traction. It was a couple years ago when, during SEC Media Days, when the bombshell dropped that Oklahoma and Texas was bolting for the SEC and they were joining the SEC in a couple seasons, and that was like mind-boggling to most college football fans. Like that really sparked the kind of situation I guess we're in now with all of the realignment talk and the literal crumbling of the Pac-12 and the Big 12 that looks completely different than it did prior to that news, obviously. And then, the Big Ten, look at every conference looks completely different. I mean, you look at the ACC, we got Cal, Stanford, and SMU as a part of the Atlantic Coast Conference. I think they should probably just go ahead and, chalk it up and call it the All Coast Conference, to be completely honest. But again, it does seem that Florida State is more public with their moves that they do. I think Clemson is making moves behind the scenes. They obviously are making moves. They have an active lawsuit against the ACC in both South Carolina, and then obviously the ACC sued Clemson in the state of North Carolina. So 2 active lawsuits being dealt with at the same time by Clemson against the ACC. And I think they're doing a lot to get out of the conference, just like FSU. I just think they go about it a bit differently. They're not quite as public with their rhetoric. They're not quite as public with the things that they are doing and the things that they are planning. And I think that's just simply a differences of styles, right? I'm not saying anything bad about the way FSU is going about it. It's just not the way that Clemson's going to go about it. They're probably going to keep as much as they can, as tight-lipped as they can until they make these decisions. But that could kind of outwardly project to the public, like you mentioned, Connor, that FSU is a bit more antsy, as you put it, to get out. And maybe it's because of some of the stuff that's recently happened with Florida State. I mean, I'm not going to lie. Them going undefeated last season and then being left out of the playoffs, that would leave a big sour taste in my mouth. And I know people are tired of hearing Florida State fans talk about it and say it, but if it was your team and it was, and you were a part of that fan base, you'd be screaming and yelling just as much. So it's an interesting situation. I don't think we're close to an end with either university. I think the ACC is prepared to drag this out for quite a bit longer. Like I said earlier, I think it will end in some sort of settlement. What that looks like, I mean, your guess is as good as mine. I have no idea. But I think it eventually gets to some sort of settlement, some sort of agreement that all parties reach, and there's going to be most likely a hefty monetary tag that goes along with that. So again, a long road, I think, yet to go. I think Clemson may be out of the ACC. It's obviously not going to happen by next season. They would have to announce, I think there's a deadline sometime in August that they would have to announce that they were leaving the SEC for the 2026 season. So that's not going to happen. The 2025 season, I should say. We're about to go into the 2024 season. So they would have to announce this August that they are leaving for the 2025 season. I don't foresee that happening. I think there's still a lot of legal stuff that needs to happen. Still a lot of, these courts, everybody's petitioning to drop cases and all sorts of stuff. The legal process is not a very streamlined process. So we'll see. Maybe this time next year, we have a bit more clear picture of what is going on with both Clemson and Florida State. And maybe Florida State, because of how public they've been with everything, maybe they're the first to announce, and, they could do something crazy and announce much earlier than Clemson. I don't really know. So we shall see. All stuff that will eventually come to fruition, and we will know the full picture, but it's probably going to be a while before we get there. Steel Gamble says, at Connor, personally, I'm all in on moving to the Big 12. I think that's interesting. My first reaction when I hear Clemson or Florida State moving to the Big 12 is I don't think you file these very expensive lawsuits to get out of the ACC for a similar situation in the Big 12. And I know, a lot of talk about, them being able to secure funds and leveraging certain things to make it more financially make sense. But at the end of the day, I just don't see that happening. Now, I could be wrong. Clemson and Florida State could very well end up in the Big 12. Who knows? Again, college football, if you just look at it, it's changed so much in the past, 3-4 years. It's crazy. So I guess at this point, if you're a college football fan, anything can happen. So, but I'm not so sold on Clemson and Florida State moving to the Big 12 like you still gamble. But again, I guess anything's possible. Ben Villalobos gets in. I still think a move to the SEC is possible. And ESPN's contract with the SEC, they agreed to pay any new members the same amount as other members, meaning a slice of the pie, quote, doesn't make much sense. I think anything's still on the table. I know there's a lot of reports out there, and part of it is probably other fan bases just trying to poke fun and take shots at, whether it be Florida State or Clemson, that, the SEC doesn't want you, the Big Ten doesn't want you, you're not AAU accredited, you wouldn't bring any big TV revenue markets, new TV revenue markets to the SEC or whatever the case may be, right? But at the end of the day, these are two huge brands in college football, and I definitely think there's a path that they can end up in either the SEC or the Big Ten. But again, what goes into these people that make these decisions, what goes into their decision making, and what goes into our decision making as fans are probably two completely different things. So again, it's anyone's guess at this point. All right, let's see. Steel Gamble says we seem split as a fan base, to be honest. You talking about as far as the realignment talk, Steel Gamble, about where we end up, or what are you talking about as far as a split fan base? Connor Johnson, but the consensus is y'all definitely want out. Yeah, absolutely. No doubt about it. Clemson wants out of the ACC. I don't think it's a repairable relationship. I think Clemson and Florida State are 100% out of the ACC. How they get out of the ACC and not how they get out. Obviously, they're going to get out by paying money, but how long it takes to get through the legal process and come to an agreement remains to be seen. How much that will cost Clemson and Florida State, again, that remains to be seen. But it's going to be a hefty price. John Sarian, one of our regulars in here, also one of our moderators. Thanks for stopping in, buddy. Always in here. Kiffin did something to make me like him finally with what he said to Feinbaum. I didn't see this clip, but I was scrolling through today and saw an article about how he kind of went at Feinbaum. I think it's well documented how Clemson fans feel about Paul Feinbaum and the shots that he loves to take at Clemson and loves to take at Dabo Swinney. He just took another shot at Dabo Swinney about Dabo's comments on unintended consequences for the college football playoff and the expansion that just happened there. So we'll talk about that a little bit later in the show. But, I agree, John Sarian. All right. Steel Gamble. ACC blows plus the Big 12 is more respect, and new matchups would be fun. The new matchups would be fun. That's one of the, I guess, the good things about what is going on with college football right now and the realignment stuff. As much as I don't really like it, I would like to see the Pac-12, suddenly become a conference again. I would like to see the teams go back to where they were. That's never going to happen. The cat's out of the bag, if you will. And we are where we are when it comes to the expansion thing, and it's not over. College football is going to continue to evolve, I think, pretty quickly. And, I think maybe, 2, 3, 4 years down the road, maybe we get to some stability where there's not so much change all the time, where we get to something a little bit more, I guess, sustainable, something a little bit more with finality to it. But the new matchup thing is cool. Like you think about this year, Texas going to Texas A&M, a rivalry that was a deep-seated rivalry for for years and years and years and years, and then suddenly they didn't play because of Texas A&M's move to the SEC, and everybody knows that. That's well documented. So that's a fun rivalry that's coming back. That's going to be a crazy game. Can't wait to watch it. So new matchups and stuff like that are fun, and it is going to bring some excitement to the game. Teams that you've never faced before or don't face very often. Just going to give you unique matchups with all of the realignment stuff. But again, I would still vote to go back to maybe a little bit more time when it made sense to me. But that's just me. That's my opinion. John Sarian says FSU has more money backing its exit more than ANSI. Yeah, that's probably a good point. They certainly seem to have a lot of alignment when it comes to their desire to get out of the ACC pretty much by any means necessary, because they're very public about the things that they say. And it's not only coming from, obviously, FSU fans, it's coming from officials at the school, people in high places, people that are listened to when they speak, right? So they definitely have a lot of backing and a lot of financial backing. So having dealt with the Big 12, I wouldn't be so sure that it is more respected. That's just what they're pushing on Twitter. From a neutral perspective, the ACC is ahead. Yeah, I think the commissioner of the Big 12 is just trying to do the best he can to promote that conference and leverage what he can and try to gain money and popularity and try to keep up with, the SEC and the Big Ten. Those are the two conferences that I guess the two left of the Power Four are chasing, right? The ACC and the Big 12, they're chasing the Big Ten and the SEC. And are they ever going to catch them? Probably not. The gap's probably too wide, and the power dynamic with the brands and the amount of brands that those two conferences have been able to acquire is probably going to be insurmountable. But again, obviously the commissioner of the Big 12 is going to continue to leverage stuff and try and do his best to elevate his conference, something that the ACC has no interest in doing, in my opinion. I don't think they do a very good job of that at all. So I guess at the end of the day, what I'm saying is at least he's trying. Probably not going to work, but at least he's trying. To the casual mind, the ACC is basically non-Power 5 level. Yeah. To a big portion of college football, yeah, probably a big portion of college football fans, I should say. That's probably true. ACC, as it stands, is a better conference. Jim Phillips just does nothing to promote it. Yeah, that's kind of what I was just saying, Jay, is the ACC does nothing to self-promote itself. It doesn't seem that they have been forward-looking with any of this stuff. And you could say that about, the Pac-12 and the Big 12 to an extent as well. When this happened, I referenced the big bombshell that Oklahoma and Texas dropped kind of on everybody during SEC Media Days a few years back. And that was like the huge, that was kind of the first rock that flew over the cliff, if you will, when it came to this whole realignment stuff. And in my opinion, all the ACC has done since then is bury its head in the sand and pretend like it's not happening. They didn't go and say, whoa, hold up. If they're doing that, maybe we need to leverage something and try to grow and better our conference by adding a big brand or two. They didn't do that. They just sat and they stayed stagnant. And the leadership in the ACC has created the problems that they currently have. I know a lot of people out there kind of take shots at both Clemson and Florida State. And I understand it from a standpoint that those two universities, along with the rest of the universities in the ACC, signed a contract. They knew what they were getting into. They signed it anyway. So I understand it from that point of view. But when you do sign that contract, you still expect your conference to do its best to leverage and create the best financial situation for all of those member institutions. And it doesn't seem that ACC has done that at all. They don't promote particularly well. I just outlined, them basically doing nothing when they saw all these other conferences making moves to try to strengthen their brand, try to strengthen their ability to leverage what they have in their conference for media money and advertising money and all that kind of stuff. And the ACC just hasn't done a good job of doing that stuff. So, and that's why they find themselves in the situation that they're in now when their two biggest brands, in football, at least Florida State and Clemson, are actively suing them and trying to sever ties with the conference. That's why you find yourself in that situation if you're the ACC. It's smarter to be less public, in my opinion. Don't want to piss off ESPN if you want them to move you to the SEC. Yeah, there could be some sort of strategic play there by Clemson. This is kind of how Clemson goes about everything. But I definitely think in this situation, being less public at times can be more beneficial to negotiating power and kind of strategy, because these are very complicated things. I'm no lawyer. I'm not going to pretend to be one. I don't know what's going to go into these cases, and I don't know the outcomes of what they will be or how strong Clemson's case is versus how strong the ACC's case is. I have no idea. But I do know that I agree with Connor in the fact that I think taking a less public approach may give you more leverage in some situations, but also, some public approach could help in some areas as well. So, Steel Gamble, I was done with the ACC when they didn't put their foot down on Notre Dame during the COVID year. Absolutely. I have said this many times before, talking to friends and family and all of that stuff. And Clemson, or excuse me, not Clemson, the ACC allowing Notre Dame to just dictate everything when it comes to its relationship with the ACC and how they're able to just be kind of half in, and have what seems like most of the benefits of being a part of the ACC without having to be attached to the ACC. The fact that they have let that go on, and the fact that they allowed them to become a member of the conference for that one season without getting anything in return, as far as from an ACC conference standpoint, it's just mind-boggling to me. I don't know how you can make that decision and not leverage that to better your conference. And some people be like, well, during COVID, you probably shouldn't leverage that. Sometimes you got to use what you got in order to leverage with those big business deals. And the ACC failed to do it. And it might not have worked. It might not have done anything. Notre Dame could have just been like, whatever, we just won't play. That may have been what happened. But I think the ACC should have at least made an attempt to get something out of allowing them to become a member of the conference for that one season. Casuals respect and watch Clemson, FSU, Miami, North Carolina State more than Utah, Kansas, Arizona. That's the main difference. Yeah, I would agree. All right. Let's see. The ACC copied the Big 12 grant of rights. Why would Clemson go to the Big 12 for the same contract? That's kind of my point, Big Mick. It doesn't make any sense to me. You took on this big, expensive lawsuit. You're paying these high-priced lawyers to get you out of a conference to go to a conference that has a somewhat similar situation. Maybe they get a little bit of a better financial situation, but it's not that much better for all the trouble that you went through getting out of the ACC, in my opinion. So I'm with you on that. Oklahoma State, BYU, Texas Tech, Baylor, West Virginia, etc. The Big 12 top to bottom is a better conference, especially without Clemson and FSU. Yes. Once you take those, Brent, yeah. Connor says, over under $200 million settlement to leave the ACC, in your opinion. It's probably going to be over. I would say over. You guys let me know what you think, but I think it'll be probably over $200 million. Maybe that number reduces as the years drag on with these lawsuits. Like, say it's sometime this time next year and the lawsuits are still going on. Maybe that number that Clemson or Florida State would have to pay goes down. I'm not really sure how they're going to calculate that or what the final decisions will be made. What the final numbers will be based off of. I don't know, but I would bet over 200 million as we sit today. For Clemson and FSU, it's the power to or bust. Otherwise, it's an expense, including potential penalties to the ACC aren't worth it. Yeah, that's where I'm at, John. I'm 100% with you. It's power to or bust for both Clemson and FSU because of all the trouble and not only. Well, you think about the money that Clemson or Florida State are eventually going to have to fork out to the ACC to no longer be a member. Whatever that number is, 200 million, 300 million, 400 million, whatever the case may be. That's on top of all these already accrued legal expenses, right? They're currently paying all these legal expenses, right? So the number that you see them pay the ACC is not the real number. You then have to include all these lawyer fees. And I know, based off of who wins, the other side will be like that. The loser has to pay my lawyer fees and all that. And, maybe that stuff goes into it. But I'm just saying, like, currently as we stand, Clemson is spending a lot of money currently trying to get out of the ACC. So I don't think they do that for a similar or slightly better situation, depending on how you look at it or how the Big 12 looks in a year or so. Steel Gamble, without Clemson and FSU, the ACC is just as competitive as the Big 12. When you take the championship contenders out, of course, the conferences are more fun / competitive. Big Mix says ESPN is the enemy. Excuse me, guys. Steel Gamble says Big 12 notoriously does well in the postseason compared to ACC teams. I'd have to look it up to get the numbers on that. ESPN can share revenue from the SEC to the Big 10 to keep parity among the conferences. I guess ESPN can do whatever they want, honestly. They got all the money. Them and Fox, I guess. Does all this movement make college football super unstable right now, or do we see it just as the law of landscape right now? Intelligent Savage, in my opinion, college football is extremely unstable right now. Because of, we saw it last season. Literally, an entire conference imploded. It literally disappeared seemingly overnight. That's instability to me. The fact that the two prominent football institutions in the ACC are currently suing to get out means college football is currently unstable. The fact that All these teams have moved around, and there's two teams over there on the West Coast that don't have a home. They are what's left of the Pac-12. Means this college football is unstable right now. Now, I think we eventually work towards stability, but as we get there, I think college football is very unstable. I think all of these movements and all of these realignments and the difference that half the Pac-12 being in the Big Ten, half of it going down to the Big 12, like it's just a very unstable time for I think conferences. It's unstable for individual institutions and universities, and I think this will be growing pains to eventually get to where college football is going, which in my opinion probably looks like some sort of super league, if you will. Will that consist of the Power Two, and they kind of break off? I'm not sure, but I think it consists of some sort of super league, and I think eventually you could see a world where college football breaks off from the rest of college athletics and becomes separate from the NCAA. I think you could see something like that. You're going to see revenue sharing come, right? There's going to be probably salary caps and all this crazy stuff. And once we get there, I think we'll be all right. It may not be a happy time for everybody. Everybody's obviously not going to like where college football ends up. We are obviously transitioning to a product that is far more focused on the postseason than college football used to be. So fundamentally, it's kind of changing in that way. But we will get to a point where it's more stable. But right now, in my opinion, it's extremely unstable. There's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of decisions still to be made before we get to that point where everybody can kind of settle down, take a deep breath, look around and be like, all right, where'd we end up? Prince says we need a new league, the grade praise the grade 8. Yeah. Let's see. All right. Connor Johnson, that makes me sad. Pac-12 and the ACC should die in back-to-back years. Could die in back-to-back years. Yeah, absolutely. It's a possibility. I know y'all are just responding to the way back Texas move and USC, but still college football is so messed up. Yeah, that's kind of my point. That's my point for the instability. I mean, when you got brands like Oklahoma and Texas leaving the Pac-12 for the SEC, and you got brands like USC and Oregon and Washington and all these other teams leaving for the Big Ten, it's super unstable. It's crazy. It's still crazy to me that we saw a conference literally die seemingly overnight. That's still crazy to me. I never thought I'd see the day as a college football fan that a conference would literally just like kind of dissolve like that. I think college football fans are now addicted to the Game of Thrones offseason, and it almost makes fans clamor for it. It seems like we've had a Game of Thrones style offseason ever since that Oklahoma and Texas announcement, right? Every single year it's been something, right? Some sort of big crazy news in the offseason about realignment or, whatever the case may be. So you could be on something there. Can we talk about how well this Clemson coaching staff is shaking out? Maybe 1 to 2 questionable spots. Yeah, look, I think the Clemson coaching staff is in a really good situation right now, Jay. I think, coming off of media days, seeing these guys talk about their individual position groups and talk about their players and their development and where they see their groups heading into fall camp and the questions that still have to be answered. It seems like there's a different vibe around the Clemson coaching staff in recent years, right? Like, I think it started with Dabo shaking up the coaching staff with adding Garrett Riley, and now you got Matt Luke and Chris Rump, and you're just starting to get a different set of guys, right? You're starting to get some more experienced guys in Matt Luke and Chris Rump, right, that really bring a ton of coaching experience. Chris Rump, all his NFL experience, and Matt Luke, all of his experience being a head coach in college and producing big lineman after big lineman and first round draft picks and all this stuff. I think you're starting to see kind of a shift in the Clemson coaching staff, and it's good to see. It's good to see some of these guys in there, and I think the right hires are being made to kind of turn this Clemson coaching staff around. I think we've talked about it. I think there was a lot of inexperience, especially along the offensive side of the ball. You bring in a guy like Garrett Riley. Did year one go as planned? No, absolutely not. But I still think Garrett Riley was the 100% right hire. And I think year two should, you would hope, right, as a Clemson fan, that year two looks a lot different than year one. We'll get into the specifics of what Coach has said a little bit later when Jordan pops on. But, you think about the wide receiver group. Me and Jordan have talked about it on several shows leading up to fall camp that's about to kick off here shortly. But, you heard coaches, just talk about these wide receivers. And it wasn't just the offensive coaches, right? It wasn't just the offensive side of the ball talking about these receivers and the depth and all that. You heard, Mike Reed, DB coach, talk about, hey, my DBs are getting better going against these guys. These guys are challenging my DBs. So it's good to hear. I think we're in a good spot. Again, there's still a lot of questions to be answered for this team heading into the 2024 season, but I think from a coaching standpoint, we are in a better position than we were a year or two ago. This new college football game is legit. I just beat South Carolina this morning to finish 12-0. Hey, shout out to you, Steel Gamble. Just hopefully, we can replicate your success on EA Sports College Football 2025 in this 2024 season. So let's hope that can happen for us. You gotta send the good vibes. 98-7 was the score. Good Lord, man. So, speaking of the EA Sports College Football game, we're going to talk about it a little bit with Jordan. I haven't played it yet. I haven't played it at all. Not gonna lie to you guys. I'm gonna probably try to download it tonight and maybe play it a little bit before I go to bed. But that aside, some of these scores I've seen on social media, people are just going crazy. I think, what was it, Sam Hartman that posted a score playing Clemson, said blowing off a little steam because famously he was, probably the only quarterback in history to ever lose to Clemson 5 times. I think it was, or 4 times, whatever it was. But tough luck for him. Glad he got to blow off some steam on a video game, though. But that's never going to happen in real life, Sam Hartman. Sorry for your loss. But sounds like a lot of people are enjoying the game. How many of you guys are out there are playing the game? How many people have played it so far? What do you guys think? What's your favorite game mode? Are you guys Dynasty guys? Are you Road to Glory or whatever it's called? What's your guys' favorite game mode? Prince says the nice thing about the Great Eight. I like this. You should copyright this in case they try to use it. You can get paid off of it, Prince. It is that allows for great matchups outside the league to fill the gaps. That's an interesting. That's an interesting take. So you think the ACC should become the Great Eight? If the ACC could have taken any three teams along or on the East Coast, other than the three they got, who's your three? What three would I have taken that would have made sense? Any conference, we could just have three teams along the East Coast. Obviously, I think Notre Dame would have been the first option. I talked about how Clemson should have tried to get Notre Dame to lock something in more permanently when they allowed them to join in 2020. Let's see. I have to think. Notre Dame's the first one that comes to mind, obviously. I have to think about that a little bit. Memphis, UFC, SMU would have been decent for the ACC if they'd have looked ahead years ago. Yeah, I think though that could have added some value to the ACC. Excuse me. Those are obviously already programs that have established themselves as the top of the kind of group of five teams. So let's be real. Even if the ACC was promoting, the best brands would still want out because of the TV deal. Yes, that is 100% true. And the ACC negotiated a bad TV deal. And I'm not sure. Again, I'm not in these rooms. I would never be able to negotiate a TV deal myself. So the people out there that would be like, you think you could do a better TV deal? Absolutely not. But I'm saying when you lock in a TV deal for as long as the ACC did, it makes no sense. You can clearly see that these TV deals grow very rapidly. And you locking one in for that amount of time just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense at all. And that's why the ACC is in this position. They signed a deal that's so long, and basically ESPN's got all the leverage. They call all the shots. The ACC can't do anything. So again, not a good situation to be. All right, Jordan has arrived. I'm gonna go ahead and bring him on. Jordan, how you doing tonight, man?
Good, man. How do I sound?
You sound great, man. You sound great.
Okay, good. Because, sorry for the late start, guys. I guess we had to kind of we kind of traded off late starts.
That's right.
Last week it was you with the conflict, the schedule conflict, the unexpected schedule conflict, and this week it was me.
Hey, it happens. The show must go on. We got all the people here. We got 25 people in the live chat. Thanks for popping on. Appreciate you, man. I'm gonna hit you with this question. I thought it was a pretty good one. If you could take prior to all this realignment stuff. So we've been talking kind of, I don't know if you've been listening, but a lot of realignment stuff. We'll move on from that here in a minute. But with what my point was that the ACC should have reacted when OU and Texas announced that they were leaving the SEC. That was their cue to, there's some movement in college football. We maybe need to kind of strengthen our conference. They didn't do that. So Intelligent Savage asked, what three teams would you have taken at that point along or on the East Coast that would have made sense for the ACC to add? my first one that popped in my head was obviously Notre Dame. Leveraging that 2020 season would have been my first thing that I would have done to force them to make some sort of decision or just not play a football season in 2020.
Yeah, I mean, I think Notre Dame is obviously it makes the most sense. I mean, you have the scheduling agreement that you've had since 2014 or so. Obviously, they compete in the ACC and all other sports. They're one of the biggest brands in the entire sport. Like adding Notre Dame is obvious plus value for any conference. That's why the Big Ten is trying so hard, and Notre Dame is kind of holding fast. I mean, if the ACC had been able to lock Notre Dame down and into an actual full membership type of contract, we'd be talking about the grant of rights and all the stuff regarding realignment and future revenue streams a lot differently. Obviously Notre Dame culturally they value their independence, so it wouldn't have been the easiest thing to do in the world, but ideally it would have been Notre Dame. That's number one. There's, as far as additions are concerned, I mean it's that and only that, as far as what gives you additional revenue. But from a fan perspective, like adding, I think if you had been able to land like a West Virginia or a UCF, I think those two schools would have fit in perfectly. Obviously, West Virginia has no business being in the Big 12, and
They really don't.
That for a while. They're just kind of out in their own little island, as far as, at least in the old Big 12. Now it's a little bit different with some of the new additions. It's a little more national, but still, like, they were in the old Big 12. They were, just kind of out there in the middle of nowhere, and they had to travel far for basically every road game. And when obviously they have the natural rivalry with Pitt already in the ACC, they can play along the East Coast and up and down the East Coast, and create new rivalries and create new matchups. I thought, and they're obviously a really passionate fan base, which I think is something that the ACC has needed. Because when you look at the bottom half of the conference and you look at some of the attendance and the fan passion and investment, West Virginia outclasses quite a few schools in that department. So felt like that would have been a really natural fit. And like I said, I already mentioned UCF, and getting another Florida school might be kind of, I understand why there'd be hesitancy there, but they're the fastest growing university in the United States. Yeah. And they're one of the largest in enrollment right now, if not the largest. And they're obviously investing a ton of money, and they've basically skyrocketed to become a P4, I guess now, team. And so, UCF would have been a great addition as well. So I think those would have been my three. Intelligent Savage, you mentioned Cincinnati as well. That would have been interesting to kind of get up into the Midwest. I think there's a world where that would have worked too.
Yeah, I mean, you think you got Syracuse up there, so maybe that does make a little bit of sense to go ahead and add Cincinnati to the conference. Plus, really good group of 5 school towards the top every single year. Could probably transition to the P4 relatively easy. Not that it's ever an easy transition, but they're definitely one of the most equipped teams to do it. But yeah, West Virginia makes a lot of sense to me as well. Their fans burn a couch in the middle of the road. So, I mean, it don't get much more, I guess, fanatic than that. So.
Oh, and that's right. John mentions Cincinnati and Louisville. Obviously, they already have history in the old Big East, so that's a very natural and geographical rival there. So yeah, I mean, and there's a lot of because Tommy Tuberville, like back when Tommy Tuberville was coaching Cincinnati, and Louisville was, those were some good teams. Those were some good years. So that would have been a lot of fun as well. UConn. If
From a basketball
if
standpoint, yeah.
from a basketball standpoint, that would have been an impeccable ad. And I guess you take the terrible football
Yeah.
because I think their basketball program is certainly worth it. So, and obviously they're just naturally, and if we're talking geography, Atlantic Coast, I mean, UConn certainly fits that bill. So, yeah, I mean, I think those would all be great. Would have been great additions, especially if they had been made, when it was a little bit more feasible.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, the ACC, like I said before, buried their head in the sand, pretended like nothing was going on, and now they find themselves with their two biggest brands suing them, trying to get out of the conference. Yep. So, and they signed a ridiculously long TV deal that gave them no negotiation power with ESPN, in all to get what we now know as the ACC network. That's why they signed that deal, to get that ACC network.
Yep.
Was it worth it? No. So that's why we find ourselves in the situation we're in now.
All right. So, I mean, what have I missed? Because I wasn't able to tune in. I listened for like at the start, and then I had to tune out. So what have we hit on so far? Because I have a lot of thoughts on kind of the stuff that's gone on the past week.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we have hit on just listener comments. So pretty much the
basically what I did last week.
Yeah, conference realignment kind of dominated the topic of conversation. Jay made a comment about the Clemson coaching staff and how it seems to be in a better situation now. So I spoke to that a little bit.
Yeah,
but I said we talk more about that later, about the coaches' interviews. But really all we've talked about is, really conference realignment and stuff like that. A lot of people asking about, how we feel about the Big 12 and that those rumors that are out there, and, the rumors that are out there that, quote unquote, the SEC and the Big 10 don't want Clemson or Florida State. And Clemson and Florida State are Big 12 bound. I told everybody that doesn't make sense to me. I don't think you hire these big expensive attorneys and take on this financial responsibility of these lawsuits with the end goal of getting to a similar or slightly better situation in the Big 12.
Right. I mean, and reports from multiple people that are in the know and from the Clemson perspective have not corroborated those claims. And, David Hood was on Twitter earlier this week when the Big 12 stuff was talking about it. He said, I have it on good authority that the Big 12 has not been a topic of conversation when it comes to Clemson and the ongoing lawsuit and what the future prospects are for conference membership. So that doesn't mean it won't happen. And honestly, and if there's a world where there's a certain dollar amount that the Big 12 could potentially get to, where I think that might actually be a good option. So, I mean, I'm not ruling out the Big 12, and I wouldn't be up in arms if it ended up being the Big 12. It obviously would depend on the terms and what Clemson is actually getting out of it. But if you're going there to basically be just another piece in the pie, the Big 12 pie, then you might as well just stay in the ACC. So obviously there would have to be some sort of increased revenue. They've been talking about the Big 12 and private equity and stuff, and I don't know how all of that works.
I don't either. I'm not even going to pretend to
I don't
know
even
how
think
that works.
I don't think it's feasible, and I don't think it would make sense if I were another Big 12 institution. I don't know why I would agree to do that. So I mean it would basically be like giving Oklahoma and Texas preferential treatment all over again, and we saw
which is what a lot of the member institutions of the Big 12 didn't like.
Right.
They didn't like that unequal revenue share that happened. So you're just going to invite Clemson and Florida State in So basically, you just replace Texas and OU with Clemson and Florida State. What's the point in that? Just to offer them unequal revenue sharing, because that's the only thing that would make it worth it, is they would have to pay Clemson and Florida State more.
Yep.
Otherwise, it just doesn't make sense. So, and if I was a Big 12 school, I wouldn't agree to that.
No, me neither. It doesn't make financial sense. Like I especially the programs that have just joined the Big 12 and are trying to increase their status within the college football ranks and increase their own brand. It's like, okay, well, why would I accept being second fiddle? And obviously the teams that are still there, like Oklahoma State, they've spent basically their entire existence in the shadow of Oklahoma and Texas, and now they finally are one of the premier programs in that league. And it's like, why would I agree to have two newcomers come and just put me in the same situation I was in before? Like that would make sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, it's a huge mess. It's like I was telling everybody in here earlier, where this all ends up, I have no idea. But it's probably another year away or so from actually being resolved. Everybody knows these court cases don't move very quickly.
No, they do not.
Eventually, there will probably be some agreed upon amount of money that will be an absolute insane amount of money to the regular people like us for Clemson and FSU to get out of the conference, and they'll pay it and they'll have to go elsewhere. Where they end up, again, that's anybody's guess at this point. If you know, let me know, because I don't think anybody knows, including the two institutions that are currently trying to leave. I don't think they know either.
Right. Like I don't. It's very the people that are truly driving these, driving all of these decisions are very few and far between, and they're not the ones leaking stuff on Twitter. So
you don't say.
So that's how I kind of know. And you go back to last year, and there were reports that the Big Ten had no interest in adding Washington and Oregon.
Zero interest.
It was not. It was a non-starter.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're about to be playing Big Ten football.
Wasn't there some sort of agreement between the Pac-12 and the Big Ten?
and the ACC?
And then they stole all their teams. So
that was funny.
Yeah. Take any of that stuff with a grain of salt.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm sure people don't want to hear us talk about.
Yeah, we can go ahead and leave the realignment set. I've been talking about it for essentially an hour at this point. We can go ahead and leave that there. And we will, I guess, transition to the plan portion of the show now. Now that Jordan's here, I wanted to save all of our plan topics tonight until you hopped on the show, and then we'll see where we are from a time standpoint at the end. Maybe we take a couple questions at the end. So you guys stay tuned for that. Make sure we got 31 people in the live chat right now. Make sure you guys are hitting that like button. Hit that like button. Hit that like button. Hit that like button for us.
Absolutely.
Consider subscribing if you have not already. Me and Jordan do the All In Show right here every Friday. So come hang out with us 5:30 every Friday, and we will chop it up about Clemson football and college football. Don't forget the super chat feature if you want to support what me and Jordan do here. And without further ado, let's get into our first topic of the night. And there was a slight mention of this earlier, Jordan, when I was into the comment sections. But let's go ahead and get into our first topic of the night. And we're going to talk a little EA Sports College Football 25. Now, me personally, I already admitted to the comment section a little bit earlier that I can't speak to any sort of gameplay or anything on this game. I have yet to play it. I plan on downloading it as soon as I get off of here tonight and trying to play a little bit of it because I'm super excited about it. But I have not had any gameplay whatsoever. Somebody told me, a rumor, according to an inside source, that you have played the game.
Yes.
And you have a little intel for us on EA Sports College Football 25. Jordan, how is it? Is it all that they built it up to be? I'm sure you haven't played a ton of it up to this point, but I'm sure you've gotten a little taste of it. So, Your initial thoughts on it. Do you like it? Are you excited? Are you still as excited as you were before it came out?
Well, I mean, I think now that it's here, obviously it's naturally going to die down a little bit from an excitement standpoint, because now you've actually got it. Sometimes it's the buildup that is the most memorable. But yeah, I'm having a lot of fun with the game, man. I mean, I've played enough of it. I've played online. I've played in Dynasty. I've played. The only mode I haven't touched is Ultimate Team yet, and which is funny because I bought the deluxe edition. I bought the bundle with Madden, so I just said screw it, because I was like, okay, I'm probably going to end up buying Madden anyway.
Right.
So, I bought the bundle, and so I got to play it before the regular release date, when so all the early access people got to play it Monday, and I was able to play it on that day, and it's a lot of fun, man. It plays like some people were saying it's like, oh man, it's going to be Madden reskinned. It doesn't feel like Madden. There's some similar animations and stuff, but the way the game plays is a lot different. It's faster. The tackling is worse, which, I mean, if we're talking college, would make sense, but defense is difficult, man. In this game, it feels like
they make it tough.
You're bouncing off guys.
Is that why I'm seeing scores like 148 to whatever? Like,
yes,
good Lord.
Defense is very difficult, and I've been in the lab trying to figure out what kind of adjustments work for me and all that. But it's a crazy fast-paced game, but it's a lot of fun. It feels like college football. The presentation is really good. And I have like certain gameplay complaints, but that's not what the show's about. I wanted to kind of talk about Clemson, because it was some of the buildup was, man, what are our ratings going to look like? We kind of got a sneak peek of some of our players, like Barrett Carter and Peter Woods, two of the more higher rated players in the game, Jake Brenningstool. So it was interesting to see how Clemson played, and I played a good bit with them online against friends and against randoms. So first things first, the defense feels like the defense. Like I said, it was hard to play defense, but Clemson's defense plays pretty well. The defensive line feels pretty dominant. Barrett Carter is a lot of fun to user, and the DBs, they're pretty good against the pass. So like you can do a lot of different stuff. So they play like Clemson's defense, so that was fun. And offensively, it was a lot better than I was expecting, to be honest, from how it played. The offensive line is still kind of a mess, but Phil Maffa feels really good to play with. Cade Klubnik, they gave him a lot of credit in the game. He's a really, really good quarterback to play with in that game. Tyler Brown is one of the best players for my money in the game. Like, even though his rating doesn't necessarily reflect that, like I think he's only an 83, but Tyler Brown, I use and abuse him every single every single game, because I'll run like jet sweeps, and I'll run him out on drags and get him matched up on a linebacker, and he just completely outruns everybody. I'll send him on deep overs and posts, and he's a load. So Tyler Brown's a lot of fun to play with. Troy Stellato is really good in this game.
I think.
Yeah, he's really, really good in this game. Really good as a deep threat. He plays really well, and Jake Brenningstool is also really, really is a lot of fun as well. So Clemson's offense feels pretty good to play with. So I think the game did a really nice job of making the good players feel good, like they actually play to their ability. Because that was one thing I was like, okay, well, there's so many teams, and like some of are the stars going to get the attention they deserve, and is it going to feel different? But it absolutely is, and it's not just Clemson; it's every other team. Like Quinshon Judkins, does not get tackled. Like I've played against Ohio State; he's one of the most frustrating players in the entire game to play against. Like, he breaks every tackle. And then and also Jalen Milroe for Alabama is he's basically Lamar Jackson in this game. So it's playing Alabama is hell as well. But
That's not fun.
I'm having a lot of fun with the game so far, and obviously the presentation. Obviously, they did a really, really good job, especially with the stadiums. And so, I mean, I think it's mostly lived up to the hype. I have some minor gameplay complaints and things like that, but it's a lot of fun, man. I'm having a lot of fun, and you and I are going to have to play one of these days. So when you download it,
yeah, absolutely. No, we'll definitely play for sure. We will definitely play, no doubt about it. I will download it tonight. Oh, we got a super chat.
From Steel Gamble, $10. Thank you so much for supporting the show. He says, real fun so far, and the attention to detail is amazing. Only complaint so far is the annoying animation carryovers from Madden. Similar to real life, Cade to Tyler Brown is an amazing match. Yeah, I mostly agree, man. Cade to Tyler Brown is, like I said, I've been abusing that. I do whatever I can to get him in a favorable matchup because he's like he catches everything. They gave him a lot of credit with his hands. He makes all sorts of athletic diving catches over the middle of the field, and he's a great to send and take shots with as well. Like he's a lot of fun. But yeah, I kind of had a feeling there was going to be some animation carryover because they used the same movement engine. So honestly, I don't hate Madden's animations in a vacuum, but it's just like kind of how they bridge the animations and when they trigger is kind of my biggest thing. Like it doesn't feel natural, and some of that carries over into this game for sure. But it definitely, the gameplay doesn't feel like it plays a lot faster than Madden. It's a different thing, and they did. I think they added a lot of things, especially on as difficult as defense is. They did add some cool things. You can do coverage shells now, which helps you disguise your defense a little bit. Like I can run cover 3, but show like a 0 blitz, and then they drop back into cover 3, and you can bait your opponent like that and stuff like that. So that was one of the cool additions that they added that Madden should have had in the game a long time ago. So there's some gameplay elements that NCAA has that Madden doesn't, that I was having a lot of fun with as well. But yeah, man, Clemson is a lot of fun, and I think they're the 5th best team in the game, or 5th or 6th as far as overall is concerned. So
I watched a little bit. Like I said, I haven't played it, but I watched a little bit of the gameplay on the channel. You guys can see on the channel where they're going through Clemson's schedule, and I watched a little bit of the Georgia simulation that they did, and the Cade Klubnik and TJ Moore connection in that game was.
I forgot to mention TJ Moore. He's a lot of fun as well. He plays really.
I don't know if it was just the computer simulation or what was going on, but like I didn't watch very long, and TJ Moore must have had 150 plus yards.
He's good.
I was like, good Lord, what is going on, man? He just kept getting open. So looked like a lot of fun. So I know a lot of people out there are playing it. I'm sure a lot of people in the comment section are playing it. But what's going to be your go-to game mode, Jordan?
I've always, ever since the old NCAA games, I've always been a dynasty guy. So I've been that's where I've spent most of my time. Like I did play a good bit on opening day against my friends, and a little and some times here or there in the following days. But dynasty's always been my baby. And that's always like I love that aspect. I was never a huge road to glory guy. Like so, I mean, creating a player is fun, but you do it once you do it a couple times, it kind of gets repetitive.
I think you can really only do that mode like 2 or 3 times, and you're like, all right. I mean,
I do like that they gave you. I do like that they gave you the 3 different. Like they gave you the 3 different possibilities, or 3 or 4. Like you can be a blue chip recruit, you can be a contributor, or you can be an underdog. So basically, you could be a 5-star. 4 or 5-star, 3-star, and 2-star. And but one thing that was really funny is seeing the people that picked underdog as a 2-star, and you have to work your way up the depth chart. And like it's so hard to get, like seeing people like struggle to get on the field. Like they were like in year 3, and they hadn't seen the field. He's like, one guy was like, man, I'm playing Student Simulator. Like this is
I'm just going to college on EA Sports college football.
Like they even, because they have a GPA feature, and they like you have to choose whether to study for tests, and like there's different scenarios throughout your career that you have to choose, and it affects your GPA and stuff like that. And so, like, one guy's like, man, I got a 4.0 GPA and I've played one snap in 3 years.
Well, good thing you're graduating with it. I hope you didn't take Parks and Rec or what. Or
right.
Hopefully you took an actual degree.
Right. Like that's why I'm like, it was really funny to see that.
When you said that, like when you said like,
it's going to turn into like a career simulator. Somebody said it was going to turn into a job simulator after your career is over. You're going to have to go work in Amazon, Amazon warehouse or something.
You start just packaging stuff for Amazon. You move up to a delivery driver, then you get into management.
Oh man,
that would be hilarious.
From that aspect, they did, spice up Road to Glory a good bit, but I've always been Dynasty, and I'm rebuilding Charlotte right now because that is just school is close to home. Ton of friends that went there, and they're a relatively new program. So
yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Who are you using in Dynasty mode?
I had to I hit Charlotte first, and man, recruiting. Yeah, it's not like NCAA 14 where you could spam the insta commit glitch and like get up like 10 5-stars in a class. Like you really have to manage your recruiting hours, and whenever a Power 5 school shows interest in somebody that you're going after, you really feel it. Like it's like the amount of recruits that have been taken from me by Clemson, by Kansas State, by North Carolina. Like I'll have a guy, like I'll send the house and I'll be like DMing the player every single week and talking to his family and friends and selling him on, you're going to be playing, you're going to get a ton of playing time, you're going to be the guy here. And then to have and I invest all this time, and then like in the 11th hour, North Carolina swoops in and offers, and all of a sudden they jump to the top of his board and he commits a week later. And I'm like,
just the devastation.
It's
so many
brutal,
hours
man.
Wasted.
It's brutal, but it is a lot of fun. And you really feel, and especially when you play on Heisman difficulty, man, the CPU will cut you up. I was struggling with FCS Southeast the other day. So
you got to get fired.
Yeah. Luckily, like my goal was in year one was only 4 wins. So
well, there you go.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome, man. It sounds like a lot of fun. Sounds like it's going to be pretty interesting. I like that they made if you choose to be the underdog, that it's difficult to get on the field, because
it's
real life, because it wouldn't be very much fun if you could just like go in there and like
you're a 60 overall and you're starting.
You're starting like game 1 or game 3 of the season. Like that's not realistic.
Yeah, it's difficult, man. And then like one guy, it was so funny. He upgraded. He had got up to like a 78 overall by his junior year, and then then they brought in a guy from the transfer portal, and he didn't. They started him over him. He was in line to start, and then he had. And then he was like, okay, and then he hit the portal. It was the next year. It's so funny.
Yeah.
They really made underdog difficult. Like it's like some people are like, man, it's not even worth it. Like just
because that would be my first choice.
Yeah,
that would be my first choice. Like, I'm gonna go be an underdog.
Yeah,
I don't know,
because you get all the boosted development traits and stuff, but like if you don't have if your overall doesn't, like if you don't have the coach trust build up and your overall is low, it doesn't matter. You're not gonna play. So it was really funny.
You just got to hope people get hurt.
Yeah, that's basically what one guy did. Like he said, one guy got like he was still like third string, and his first game was in a playoff game because both quarterbacks in front of him got hurt.
Oh man, that's crazy.
I was like, wow. So I mean, but it's cool that it can play out a lot of different ways. So it's dynamic like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's gonna be a lot of fun though. We'll definitely get together and we'll play online for sure.
All right. Isaac, he says, I've seen videos of people going to parties getting blocked by girls in the DM. Yeah, that's funny. You get the option to, like, one is really funny. You get the option to like your teammate's girl breaks up with him, and then he comes to you looking for comfort, and then you can either like hang out with him and comfort him, hang out with him for the entire week, or you can ask for the girl's number.
Oh man, that's messed up, bro.
whoever added that option, they're a menace. But I thought that was really funny.
That's tough, dude. That's crazy. That's brutal. Yeah. No mercy, man. No mercy. We got 30 people in the live chat right now. Thank you guys for sticking it out with us. Appreciate all you guys. Hit that like button if you have not already. Consider subscribing if you haven't. Super chat feature is available if you want to support what me and Jordan are doing here at the Voice of College Football, and more specifically the All In Show right here on Clemson Football at the Voice of College Football. All right, Jordan, let's go ahead and get into our next segment. And hold on one second. Let me get the banner. I must have deleted it, so I will add a new one. You know how it goes.
Yep.
Oh, hold up.
Let's see.
All right, I got it. All right, guys. So on to our next segment. We are going to talk a little recruiting update for the Clemson Tigers. Again, we have, fingers crossed, some big news coming tomorrow, Saturday at noon. We're going to get a decision from four-star Bryce Davis, obviously defensive end, 250 pounds, out of North Carolina. He is set to announce at noon tomorrow, like I said. Signs are pointing to Clemson. Fingers crossed. He got crystal balled to Clemson by several people. I think most recently Thursday this week he got crystal balled. Obviously, we've talked about him in the past. His parents are heavy Duke lean. If it was their decision, fortunately for Clemson, it is not their decision. So obviously still between Duke, South Carolina, Georgia, and obviously our Clemson Tigers. Jordan, how confident are you of Clemson's ability to land Bryce Davis? Are we going to get some good news tomorrow to kind of – I mean, you think about this. If Clemson lands Bryce Davis tomorrow, right, you add him with Amir Adams, Isaiah Campbell, and Ari Watford, and then you add Bryce Davis. What a haul for the defensive line group for this 2024 or 2025 class.
Absolutely. I mean, it would be massive and put a bow on the defensive line class in general, and also kind of reverse a little bit of the trend from the past couple of months with the kind of the seeming lack of recruiting momentum after the official visit weekend. So, and we've talked about it. It's like, hey, it's the misses are they suck right now, but Clemson still has a really good opportunity to close this summer window really strong and head into the season with a good core of the class together. So, Bryce would be absolutely massive. As you mentioned, it's kind of been a recruitment that's kind of had some ups and downs, and it's kind of been a really, really back and forth at different points. At one point, Georgia was the front runner, and all of the suitors felt like they were the front runner. Some things happened with their class and kind of what the numbers they wanted to work with. And Duke has been a steady presence, of course, because of the family connection. And I think it's still up in the air. He still said he hasn't made a decision. So, that always kind of tells you, okay, well, we might be in for it's kind of a good old fashioned. It's not necessarily a good old fashioned recruitment because there's been a ton of crystal balls for Clemson, but there's still some uncertainty there. Like it's not, it doesn't feel like one of those where it's a done deal yet. And from what I understand, none of the schools have been informed of his decision yet. So we'll see. We'll all find out together tomorrow. But I do think, Clemson is in the best position. Duke has made a push, and Clemson has taken it very seriously. Yeah. But I think, Clemson is in the best position to win his commitment tomorrow. So if I had to put a number on it, I'd say 80%, and I'm going to leave that 20% because the influence of your parents can be really strong. Whether even though it is his decision, you can never discount that. And of course, Duke is obviously wanting him to be one of the centerpieces of their class. And that's something that they've been driving to him hard. So, yeah, we'll see what happens tomorrow. But I do like where Clemson sits. So we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's going to be exciting for Clemson tomorrow. And I mentioned the three other guys that Clemson's already got in the class along the defensive line: Ari Wofford, Isaiah Campbell, Amir Adams. Look, this would really be the cherry on top for this defensive line class in 2025. I feel really good about it. All the crystal balls obviously are coming in on Clemson, so that makes you feel good. Read an article where he was talking about Clemson and kind of the relationships that he has with the coaches and Dabo Swinney, obviously, and Nick Eason and Chris Rumpf, and how close he is to them, and how I'm trying to remember how he put it. He said every time he lands in Clemson, it just feels right, is I think how he said it in the interview. So that makes you feel really good. We always say that Clemson's a special place, and there's something in those hills. So obviously he's being drawn there. I thought he was probably going to end up at Georgia probably a week or two ago. If you would have asked me, I'd have said he was probably going to end up at Georgia. Looks like Clemson's kind of turned the tide, fighting off, advances from Georgia and Duke, obviously. He went to USC for an official visit. That was his last official visit. Don't really think that made a major impact on him whatsoever. So look to get some good news for Clemson. Finally get some good news after somewhat of a lull. We've been at that lucky number 13, I guess you could say, as far as commitments for a while now. I think we're down to number 16th as far as the recruiting rankings go as of right now. So,
but we're top. I think we're 6th in average rating.
Absolutely. Look, Clemson's class is small, so it's hard for Clemson not to drop in the rankings when they're not taking very many people. Say we get Bryce Davis tomorrow, that's only 14 commits. So we're obviously dropping in the rankings because people are adding quantity. But when you look at the quality of Clemson class, to your point, Jordan, top 6. So Clemson's still recruiting at a very high level. They're just not taking that volume because the slots aren't there based off of who they anticipate to be leaving, right, and scholarships available. Couple more guys to note: Dylan Alfred, Logan Anderson, still guys that are tracking towards Clemson's favor, in my opinion. Obviously, we got the All-In Cookout coming towards the end of this month that Clemson will host. I think Dylan Alfred is confirmed coming to that. And I got a sneaking suspicion that maybe he announces on or around that weekend, which would be really big for Clemson to kind of top off that receiver class and kind of head in the right direction there as well.
Absolutely. And, I know it's been kind of frustrating with the receiver recruiting this cycle. But, I do think that one thing that has been driven home, from opposing staffs with Clemson has been the kind of the numbers that they have already on the roster. That was kind of a big thing that helped Oklahoma land Cortez Mills. They basically said, it's like, hey, look at all the guys that are on Clemson in Clemson's receiver room right now. Look at the 2 guys that they just brought in last cycle. And that was one of the things that ultimately influenced him to to end up choosing Oklahoma. So that's been something that Clemson has had to battle with, because they just haven't had a ton of they haven't had the departures that one would have expected. If you had told me this time last year that Clemson would only lose one receiver in the transfer portal, from the group, I would have been like, wow, okay, that's shocking, with just the sheer amount of bodies. Like Bo Collins that left, and that was it. That's one of the things that Clemson has had to contend with as far as recruiting is concerned at the receiver position. So, but Dylan Alfred is a guy that obviously had a ton of interest in Clemson, and Clemson had been in contact for a good while, as Clemson tends to do behind the scenes. And he decided, it's like, oh, well, the time was right for him to kind of, start taking the steps to maybe eventually be in Clemson's class. And so, and he's really, really good football player. We really like his tape. So I think he would be a really nice addition, and kind of get Clemson to the numbers that they kind of thought they would be at for this class from a receiver standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm really excited about Dylan and adding him to the class. Obviously, he came and visited in the spring, then came and worked out at camp. Obviously, that communication you alluded to was going on behind the scenes. He decommits from Ole Miss. An hour or so later, announces his official offer from Clemson. So everything trending in the right direction when it comes to that. Charles gets in and says, Bryce Davis commits tomorrow. What are your thoughts on where he goes? We were just talking about that. Definitely think Bryce ends up committing to Clemson tomorrow.
All right. I don't really have any other notes to hit on as far as recruiting is concerned. So I think that's a good time to hit on our next topic. And is that we're gonna do media days?
Yes, we will do Clemson Media Day. So I'm sure it did not escape your guys' purview, if you will, that Clemson kicked off its annual media day this past Tuesday, where we got to hear from Dabo Swinney, Garrett Riley, Wes Goodwin, all the coaching staff. Essentially, we got to hear from Matt Luke, Chris Rump, Nick Eason, all of them. Right, got to hear from all of the Clemson coaching staff about their perspective on where their rooms are, right? How their competition is shaping up. What have guys been doing in the offseason? What were their marching orders that they gave guys? Where did they see their guys improve throughout spring? How do their guys look after summer workouts now that they're back on campus? About to have the big, weigh in, and that's going to be exciting to see where guys weigh in, to see what kind of size people like Tyler Brown put on, or people like Brian Wesco put on, see where he is at from a body standpoint, see where different guys are at from a mental standpoint, and how things are going to shake out. So obviously we heard from Dabo Swinney first, Jordan, or not first, but most prominently, we heard from Dabo Swinney. I think he talked for over an hour with the media. And one of the things that I wanted to start with first and foremost is taking the media a little bit by storm. Obviously, Dabo Swinney tends to do this from time to time. Pretty much every time he talks to the media, let's be honest, he says something that riles a certain group of media members up, right? He talked about unintended consequences in college football when it comes to the expanded playoffs. And it wasn't all negative what he was talking about. He was just simply saying that essentially his thoughts were, we are becoming, as college football, we are becoming far more focused on postseason than we ever have before. College football has always been a regular season sport. That's always what has mattered most. And postseason was kind of secondary. Although bowl games were huge, and the college national championship was huge, all of that was still huge. His thoughts were, what happens when you're sitting there on rivalry weekend and you got a big conference championship game coming up the following week and you're, 11-0 and you don't really need that game, do you play your best? You know,
Right.
or on the flip side, if you've only won 2 games all season and you're 2-6, do certain guys on your roster just go ahead and shut it down and get ready for the NFL draft or so on and so forth? So, Jordan, what were your thoughts on Dabo Swinney and what he said, and then kind of the media's reaction to what Dabo Swinney said?
Yeah, I mean, it's like clockwork at this point. Every year, Dabo will say something pretty harmless and honestly not all that, controversial in the grand scheme of things. And, the media will freak out and say, oh, Dabo's stuck in his ways. He hates this, he hates that. He hadn't said anything like that, but obviously voicing some concerns that he has about the direction of the sport. Not, it's not where it says like we're in a worse place than we were before or anything like that. He's just said, okay, well, there's, change is change, but, not everything that comes with change is good. And so that was, I think that's one thing that he was driving home and just a concern that he had. But people, are going to construe that as Dabo hates the 12-team playoff and Dabo hates this and Dabo hates that. So, the media was, I didn't really even listen much to the media. I know Feinbaum said something. I didn't even bother listening to it. I don't really care what he has to say. But that's just kind of the reality of, that's the reality of Dabo Swinney and his relationship with the media. When he says something, it's gonna generate reactions, and that's kind of the reality of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I don't think Dabo Swinney said anything groundbreaking or really anything controversial. You go look at a Kirby Smart interview from not too long ago. He said something similar to the same effect. Not the exact same thing, but similar concerns he was voicing for the expanded playoff. And, teams may be looking at like, we don't need to win this game, right? And he was saying he hoped that doesn't happen. So, when he says it, it's no big deal. When Dabo says it, it's suddenly controversial and, he hates everything about college football. I assure you, he probably doesn't hate everything about college football currently. But it is a legitimate concern. When you think about it logically, you could see those situations playing out, right? Just like once upon a time, it would have been crazy to think of players sitting out of bowl games until it happened for the first time. And now it's normal. Like, it's weird if players get more questions now if they don't sit out and they're a high profile player than if they do sit out, right? So it's not that far fetched to look at some of the examples that Dabo Swinney gave and be like, yeah, I could see that being a thing in, a couple years. So I don't really think it's that controversial or that crazy. Of course, Feinbaum's going to come out and do his whole rigmarole, his whole Dabo's retarded, Dabo's, brain dead, Dabo's the get off my lawn guys, I think how he put it. Feinbaum's an idiot, to be completely frank. He lives off of doing controversial takes like he did. Dabo Swinney was 100% correct in what he said. He didn't say anything bad about the playoff. He just said, hey, because we have expanded to this 12-team playoff, these are some things that I can foresee happening because of it. Unintended consequences, right? But again, Feinbaum's got to go off on his attack Dabo charade. It gets him a bunch of clicks. It gets traction to his shows and to his Twitter page and all of that stuff. So it works out well for Feinbaum when he attacks Dabo. That's why he continues to do it. That's enough with Feinbaum. I'm not going to give him any more shine here. We're going to move on with Clemson Media Days. Dabo Swinney also talked a lot about the team as a whole. He talked about what the offense needs to do better. Talked about creating explosive plays for the offense. He talked about um, minimizing those mistakes on the offensive side of the ball when it comes to turnovers and things like that, right? And he talked about the defense, about how they did not do really well when it came to red zone defense last year. Although they did really well with not allowing people to get into the red zone, he talked about once teams got in the red zone, they scored far too often against the defense. So cleaning some of that stuff up is really what he focused on, those critical errors that Cade Klubnik and some of the offensive players made with the fumbles and the scoop and scores and the things like that that put the team in a compromised situation. He talked a lot about that. Talked about how good Antonio Williams looks. Right, got me kind of excited. That was one of my wild card picks for the season, just from a standpoint of I think he's going to have a huge season. And Dabo talked very glowingly about the work that he's put in physically in the offseason and things like that. So what were your thoughts on just kind of the key points that Dabo hit with, kind of what his improvements for the offense and defense were, his thoughts on Cade Klubnik's development, his thoughts on Antonio Williams and how he looks post-injury, basically a season of not playing. What's kind of your thoughts on how he kind of laid out the season? This is kind of the state of the union for Clemson to kind of kick off fall camp and just give fans an expectation of where Clemson is currently right now, what work needs to be done during fall camp prior to that August 31st kickoff against the Georgia Bulldogs.
Yeah, I mean, I think you got the vibe from Dabo. Like it was, you kind of like he's never usually one to be like overly. He doesn't expound overly on the things that concern him or things that he doesn't like so much. But I do think that you got the air, like just during that interview of like, he really likes where this team is. He really likes where this team is, but particularly the offense. But the reality is there's still some unknowns, and there are some things that still need to come together for this team to be the complete offense that we had hoped we would get last year, and that they're trying to be in year two. Under Garrett Riley's system. So I thought that was kind of the thing that jumped out to me. He talked about Cade Klubnik and the work he's done this offseason. And we've talked about it throughout the offseason that, it's not, Cade is not like slacking or not taking the steps necessary to become a better quarterback. And so, and that's something that's been kind of a major concern, mostly because of the spring game performance not being, what people had hoped.
Yeah.
But the reality is, and Dabo was right. He said, we don't evaluate anybody based on the spring game, good or bad. And we're the ones in practice every day. We've seen what progressions Cade has made. So you have to believe that Cade will be a better quarterback in 2024 than he was in 2023. And I believe that myself. But again, it is how much of a step has he taken? And Dabo did hit on that. He said, this team is going to find out very quick where they are in week one. So he hit on that. And he did give shout outs to guys like Antonio Williams, who I've raved about this offseason, and has kind of fallen by the wayside nationally because he spent a lot of the year unavailable. But I really do think he's at this moment Clemson's best receiver, and I think he's the leader in that room, and he sets the tone as Dabo mentioned, and he also gave a lot of praise to Adam Randall in that snippet as well. And obviously we've talked about the potential of Adam Randall and how much we want him to work out. So those are encouraging that at least we're still hearing that the things he's doing are the signs point to him having a breakout year this year. But again, we thought we were going to get we thought we were going to get a big year out of Adam Randall last year, and it didn't happen. So is he truly does he truly have a different mindset this year? We'll see. One thing I did find interesting was the quarterback depth chart for fall has been set.
Yeah.
with Klubnik being first string, Christopher Vizina being second string, and Trent Pierman being third. There was, we talked about it a lot about how the backup quarterback battle was kind of shaking out, and how we felt like that was something that hadn't been decided yet. But it's clear, I guess, right now that they fully plan on Christopher Vizina being the number 2 guy right now. And obviously fall still has to happen, and things can change, but they have a set order right now as far as behind Cade Klubnik, and that was one thing I wasn't really expecting to hear.
Mm-hmm.
So what did you think about that? Because I thought that was one of the more
I thought it was interesting, pretty surprising, to be completely honest. I much like you did not expect for them to come out and name a depth chart immediately when it came to the quarterback position, just because of how the spring game played out, and it seemed like there was some uncertainty with maybe how Chris Vizina was developing, and with what Trent Pierman put on display for, albeit just one practice, but the spring game, the only practice that the fans get to see. So obviously it gets hyped up probably a lot more than it should. And Dabo made that clear when he was talking about it, that, that's just one practice in, a long group of practices, right? That was just one day. So they take, obviously they temper the weight that is weighted. Obviously, with fans, we weigh that's the only thing we have. So everything that we say and we talk about is based off of the spring game. We don't get privilege of watching practices. The coaches do, so obviously they weigh it a bit differently than we do. But I really thought it was interesting, and maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that means that Chris Vizina is ready to truly take those second team reps, and that's, if you're a Clemson fan, that is a good thing. That is what you want to see. He needs to be developing. He needs to be progressing. He needs to be that number 2 guy. That's what Clemson needs him to be right now. He needs to be to the point where he can legitimately be that guy that runs out there should catastrophe strike and Cade Klubnik go down, right? So I think it's a good thing. A little bit surprising, like I said, but overall, hopefully that means that he is developing how we hope that he would when he was originally signed.
Yeah, and I mean, as you said, Trent, and Trent, the thing with Trent Pierman is like, okay, yeah, we talked about the spring game performance, and how sharp he looked, and how just kind of in control of the offense he was.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't like that had come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
I think that's one thing that, that was kind of the more surprising thing, because I didn't think the spring game was what, all of a sudden opened the coaching staff or opened our eyes about Trent Pierman. I mean, we had been hearing about Trent Pierman throughout the spring and in rumblings, from last year about, how much of a gamer he is, and how poised he is. And like, he was a good football player in high school, a really good football player in high school. So, we had heard about Trent Pierman before, and he had gotten praise from the staff before. So it was kind of so it didn't necessarily come. So you had an idea that, okay, there seems to be some legitimate, competition going on there. And I think there is. So, if Trent Pierman is looking good in practice, and they still feel like Christopher Vizina is the second guy, that's exactly what you want. As you mentioned, that means that, Christopher Vizina, spring game performance notwithstanding, that he's taken that step in year 2. Because the reality is, and they'll never, the staff will never word it that way, but he wasn't playable last year. And so that it was, if you got in trouble and Cade got hurt, you were kind of in a interesting predicament
Right.
as far as what to do there, because he came in as a raw, like, he was all tools basically, and he had a big learning curve. Like, he looks the part of a starting and future NFL quarterback, but he just wasn't ready. There was a lot on his plate, and there was a lot that he had to go through to make that transition from high school to college. And so if in year two he's made that jump to where they feel like they have a legitimate option at starting quarterback, and he's ahead of the guy that we've all been talking about that looks so poised and in command of the offense, that's where you want it. And obviously you have to trust that the staff is making the correct evaluation there. But that's where Clemson ideally wants to be. Not you don't want to have your former walk-on quarterback, as good of a football player as he is and as smart of a football player is. That's not really where you want to be. I mean, you brought in Christopher Rosina to eventually one day be your starting quarterback, and so
right.
That's where you want to be.
Yeah, it's definitely where you want to be, and we're gonna see what kind of growth. I mean, Dabo Swinney talked about Cade's growth. Garrett Riley talked about Cade's growth and what he's done this offseason, and really the consensus I got from both of them is the game has slowed down a bit for Cade Klubnik, which is really what you want to see. That's one of Cade's biggest issues is the game was probably too fast. One of the other things that they really talked about that they wanted to see improvement on was him trying to play hero ball, right? Trying to do too much, trying to win the game all on his own. Got to get away from that, right? You got to play within the system. You got to let these other guys that are highly recruited, that are playmakers themselves, help you out, and don't try to do it all yourself. And a lot of that comes from high school, right? You can get away with a lot more of that in high school ball. When you get to this level of college football, not so much. So I think it was good to hear similar sentiments, I guess, from both Dabo Swinney and Garrett Riley when talking about Cade Klubnik and his development and where he is at right now and where they see him progressing this season.
Absolutely. And that's ultimately what's going to drive the success of this team this year and obviously in the coming years. So, you have to the things that you wanted to see based off of what was said in media days are what we've seen. So, but ultimately it's what happens on the field, and we've heard really good things in previous off seasons and previous fall camps about where the team was, and what we got was not that. So I totally understand a Clemson fan being like, all right, I'll believe it when I see it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a perfectly valid perspective to take after the last 4 years. So
like I said, approach it with cautious optimism.
Yes.
If you can still muster that optimism up. I know a lot of Clemson fans are jaded from the past 3 seasons about things that have come out and been said, and like you mentioned, did not come to fruition. So let's talk about one of those key groups and their coach. And what he had to say, and that is Matt Luke, the new addition along the offensive line. Got rid of Thomas Austin, brought in Matt Luke. Obviously, he came in right before the bowl game, got a little bit of work with the guys, went all through spring. Now we've gone through summer, about to enter fall camp. He had a lot to say about the position group. Had some interesting things to say about the center position and that competition between Ryan Lithicum and Harris Sewell and where he sees that playing out. Obviously, if they were to run out there today, Ryan Lithicum is the starting center for the Clemson Tigers right now. But he said he could definitely see Harris Sewell getting some reps there and starting to push Ryan Lithicum, and that's what he hopes. He hopes to breed competition in this room, and really one of the big things that stood out to me, and you can tell me what stood out to you about Matt Luke, is I like his approach to the game and how he talks about his players, right? He's very energetic. He's very passionate. And typically position groups take on the personality of their coach, right? And if we could get a little bit of that out of our offensive line group, like we've said in the past, Jordan, this offensive line group is super talented. Look at the star rating of the guys that have been recruited in recent seasons along that offensive line. The talent is there. Now we got to see the development, and I think we got the guy in the room that can absolutely has a proven track record of developing offensive linemen. So hopefully Matt Luke can come in. I know it's not going to be a complete turnaround, 100% better year one. That's not what I'm trying to allude that it's going to be. However, I think he can instill some confidence in there. He talked about wanting his offensive line to play with some grit, some fire to finish blocks, right? He talked about the excitement that he gets as a coach when you're sitting there and there's a pile of guys piling up on the running back, and the offensive line comes and pushes, and they get another 3, 4, 5 yards because those big nasties up front just won't quit. So he talked a lot about finishing blocks, playing to the whistle, not quitting, right? Just being very aggressive as an offensive line. And I'm excited to hear rhetoric like that coming from a coach of the caliber that Matt Luke is. I really think that he can do a lot of good for this offensive line group. What were your thoughts on kind of what he said and where he said this offensive line group is right now heading into fall camp?
Yeah, I mean, I think you get the sense that, I mean, he likes this group a lot, and I do too, as far as the overall makeup. Like this, I think a lot of teams in the country, kind of similar to the wide receiver room. I think a lot of teams in the country would like to have what Clemson has on the offensive line, but those are the two positions that we have seen the spottiest development over the last 3 seasons. So you always have to be like. It's another one of those things where he's like, you take things with a grain of salt and you're a little jaded. But I do get the sense that Matt Luke really does like this group and thinks he has a lot to work with. And that's exciting because he's a guy that has seen some really, really good offensive lines and coached some really, really good offensive lines. So if he likes what he sees in Clemson's room, then, you think maybe you have something there. You mentioned the ongoing battle between Ryan Linthicum, Harris Sewell. Ryan Linthicum is a guy that, we've talked a good deal about just regarding this center battle. One thing that I did notice, and one thing I've seen, I think he's really done a good job of kind of transforming his body. I think he looks the part of a starting center. I didn't feel that way at times when I had seen him in the past, but I think he's put in the work from a physical standpoint to be that guy for Clemson. Now, obviously it's more than just looking good. You have to play good as well, and that's what we'll have to see. But I am intrigued about that battle, and obviously that's the most important one heading into fall camp. But we've talked and sung the praises of Harris Sewell and what he can eventually be for this Clemson offensive line as well. So I feel like you have the veteran presence and having the young guy with a ton of potential. That's always a good thing to have at any position. So felt like Matt Luke really liked the kind of the progression there and kind of how things have shaken out. I think one guy that has gotten a lot of praise, both in interviews and the behind the scenes, is Tristan Lay. I think at times, like, he showed some moments of brilliance last year, particularly in the run game. I think that's definitely his strong suit. Getting better in pass protection is something I want to see. I think he was ready. He had a lot to do as far as transforming his body when he first got to Clemson, and I think he did that. And so now it's putting all of that together for an entire season. And that's one thing he's gotten a ton of praise, in the off season. So Tristan Lay is another guy that it seems like Matt Luke was really pleased with kind of where he's at. So I think especially when we're talking about the starting five, I think there is a lot to be excited about there, and developing that depth and some of the guys behind them that we've mentioned is the biggest key, and for not just for this season but for the future, because as we said, there's a lot of young talent still in the room. We already talked about Harris Sewell, Ian Reed, Elijah Thurman is coming in. Just then you still have some veterans that are still trying to that have potential that can figure it out, like Dietrich Pennington, who Luke also gave a shout out as well. So I think Matt Luke really does like this group, and ultimately the success of this season falls on how much they can transform in year one. And like you said, it's not going to be like an immediate turnaround, but how much improvement can they make? Not just from throughout from this offseason, but during the year as well, and kind of how that sets up Clemson for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, a lot is riding on how cohesive of a group this offensive line can become. And Matt Luke talked about the importance of playing as a cohesive unit. 5 individuals, but really playing as one, and that's going to be, kind of where the rubber meets the road for this team this year. Obviously, everything starts in the trenches, and this offensive line group doesn't have to be, a top 5 offensive line in the country, but we need to see quite a bit of improvement from them, just from a consistency standpoint, even just becoming more consistent. I'd love to see the musical chairs stop along the offensive line. And yes. I really think Matt Luke is the right guy for it. I would love to go into week to week, just knowing who the 5 offensive linemen they're going to run out there first, barring injury. So if we can get to a point where that is the case, that that we have 5 to 8 offensive linemen that can rotate in and out and really play solid winning football for Clemson, I think we are in a much better situation than we have been in the past season. So, we'll keep an eye on that. Obviously, fall camp is going to say a lot about where this thing shakes up. But I think right now we know where we're at with, at least a good portion of starters. Obviously, you mentioned Tristan Lay getting a whole bunch of love. Blake Miller, obviously, on the right side of that offensive line at tackle as well. So we'll keep our eyes on
one of the best tackle groups in the country. If you can get that play, you can get, especially if you can get 2022 version of Blake Miller back and Tristan Lay playing up to his potential. I mean, that's great. And then I didn't even mention Colin Sadler, who's is factoring into both the left tackle and the guard positions.
And a dude with that size is just going to be.
He's nasty.
He's a problem.
When he gets his hands on somebody, he's as good as anybody in this room. So
it's a problem. So I'm excited to see where we're at in a couple weeks as we get into fall camp and things start becoming a little bit clearer picture. Really excited to revisit this offensive line situation and kind of see where we are. Another big key position group that's going to hinge on offensive success this season is obviously the wide receiver position, Jordan. And we've heard a lot about the wide receiver room this spring, right? Into summer workouts. Obviously, the addition of Brian Wesco and TJ Moore, we obviously saw what Brian Wesco is capable of in the spring game. It was absolutely amazing to see his athleticism, his ability to create plays in open space after he catches the ball, yards after catch, acrobatic catches. You think about the one in the end zone that he made, right? So lots of positive things. But outside of those freshmen, this is an extremely deep wide receiver room right now. I mean, it is insanely deep. You talk about an Adam Randall. You talk about an Antonio Williams. The coaches were talking about why is his name escaping me right now?
Tyler Brown, Cole Turner.
Cole Turner, thank you.
Okay.
Cole Turner. And obviously spending all last season injured, but really talking about his body transformation and how good he looks and how ready he looks to get out there and compete. And, obviously Tyler Brown, we know what he did a season ago, being, the most productive wide receiver on the roster. So you got, and then a Troy Stellato, don't forget him. He was a huge contributor last year. But you just have so much here. What were your thoughts on what Tyler Grisham had to say about this group? He mentioned that he was probably more excited about this group than more excited about this group than any other group that he had coached up to this point. So what were your thoughts on kind of what he had to say about the wide receiver group, and just your thoughts on him in general? I know he's a familiar punching bag for the Clemson fan base. He's kind of the one to point to because things haven't quite worked out at wide receiver the past 2-3 years like Clemson fans are used to. So, what's your thoughts on this room and what Tyler Grisham had to say heading into fall camp?
Yeah, I mean, you could feel that he was extremely excited about where this room is. I mean, and not just from an ability standpoint, but having all of his guys healthy. I mean, that's one of the things that he hasn't had at any point, since he's been the wide receiver coach. And yeah, I mean, you mentioned like he's more excited about this group than anyone he's coached. I mean, his first year was 2020. I mean, that group was. I mean, it was very top heavy to say the least. And obviously, he didn't even have Justin Ross that season. And because Justin Ross he did get was like half a shell of his former self.
Yeah.
And then beyond that, it's just year after year, injuries. But I think one of the things that he did a good job of, despite not always landing the top guys on the board on the recruiting trail, was the guys he did bring in were contributors, and they were some of Clemson's best contributors. And I've talked about that. I mean, Bo Collins was your best receiver in 2021, in a year where they desperately needed somebody to give them a lift. I say best receiver in 2020. He did have Justin Ross, but Bo Collins gave them the lift that they needed especially when Ross shut it down at the end of the year. So Bo Collins came in, was an immediate contributor. Obviously, things didn't work out from him from a health standpoint. And 2022, Antonio Williams comes in, basically your best receiver. 2023, Tyler Brown comes in, gives you the lift you needed, especially with Antonio Williams being hobbled much of the year. And again, that's that trend that we keep talking about. And so this is the first year I feel like he's gone into the season and he has all of his guys mostly healthy. Like you have a healthy Adam Randall, ready to finally have that breakout season. You bring back a healthy Antonio Williams, who just Dabo raved about being like a night and day difference from his freshman year, which he was really, really damn good as a freshman. So I think that's the exciting thing. And, you have Tyler Brown healthy, Troy Stellato, who has spent basically his entire year, his entire career in an injury tent, is healthy. Cole Turner, you get coming back from injury. And then we've raved about the freshmen that Clemson has brought in. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, I would be excited too, because this is finally knock on wood, this is the year I finally have my guys, and I feel like I have everything and all the tools at my disposal. And if things work out the way that we think they can, Clemson could have a really fun year offensively. And the wide receiver, a closer version of what we were used to.
It's like Garrett Riley's going to have a lot of fun scheming these guys up and using these various weapons. And one of the things that stood out to me for Tyler Grisham is he just seemed very relaxed, seemed very confident and very relaxed. And who wouldn't be with this group of 10 scholarship receivers, all of which we have mentioned to this point. And we didn't even mention all. We got Ronan Hannafin,
and Noble Johnson's still there.
Noble Johnson, those two guys, you can't forget about.
What kind of step what kind of steps do they make in year two?
Exactly. You can't forget about them. And I think he's got a lot of reason to be confident and have that calmness about him, just because of the amount of receivers and he talked about the diversity of body type and diversity of skill set that they have. I mean, you just take an Antonio Williams, right? That dude could play slot. He could play outside. He could play Z. He can play X. He can play all over the field legitimately. A full tool guy at the wideout position. He can play any position. And when you have guys like that, it just makes things difficult for defenses. So I think there's a lot of reason to be optimistic about this wide receiver room. It has not worked out in the past 3 seasons like any of us thought it would. But I truly do think this could be somewhat of a reemergence year for the Clemson wide receiver room to get closer or at least turned around in the right direction to a more similar version of what Clemson usually looks like at that position, right? I'd be surprised if by this time next year everybody's saying, oh, you can't name a wide receiver on Clemson, right? People aren't going to be able to use that line next offseason, right? Because there's going to be some guys that splash onto the scene of college football, and people are going to know who they are really quickly. So that's exciting. But let's go ahead and shift over to the defensive side of the ball, starting on the defensive line, right? You heard from Chris Rump. You heard from um, goodness.
Nick Eason.
Nick Eason, thank you. Good Lord, I'm terrible with names tonight.
No, I feel you, man. It's late.
Yeah, you heard from Chris Rump. You heard from Nick Eason talking about the defensive line group. I mean, that defensive tackle group, we've talked about it, Jordan. So deep, so incredibly deep. It's actually scary, the bodies, when you really track. It's almost like talking about our wide receiver room. When you track and you just like visualizing these guys rolling out there at defensive tackle. It's absolutely amazing. And then you talk about the defensive end group, and I really like some of the stuff that Chris Rumpf was talking about the development of these guys, and he kind of called out our boy TJ Parker there. Said he got a little fat, and he told him about it, and then he went and got his back into shape. So a little. Maybe a little bit of feeling himself from his freshman campaign, and got a little complacent, and that's why coaching is so important, right? And that's why having a guy with Chris Rump's track record and his authority in that room is so important, right? Because he can look at a guy like TJ Parker and be like, "Look, man, I've been everywhere from the highest of college football to the highest of the NFL, and you ain't it right now. You need to fix it." Right? Yeah. Being able to look at one of your best players at that position and being like, "Hey, you need to go fix yourself. Like, you're bad right now. Like, you're fat, you're overweight, you're out of shape. Go fix it." Right? That's important, man. And I love that he does stuff like that. And he talked about Peter Woods and where he's at with his body and how difficult it is for Peter Woods right now, because he's trying to keep enough weight on to still feel strong and have that ability to work in on the defensive tackle position, but also shed enough weight to be still fast and effective on the outside, which is really not easy. I know, us as Clemson fans, maybe we think it's a little bit easier than it is because we saw a guy like Christian Wilkins do it, which is just like a super athletic dude, a dude that was too big to be able to do the athletic stuff that he could do. But I think Peter Woods is definitely a capable guy. I like that he talked about the depth behind Peter Woods and TJ Moore or TJ Parker, excuse me, and how he didn't think that they needed to go to the transfer portal. He talked about how Dabo Swinney came to him and was like, "Hey, we lost a guy to the transfer portal. Do you want to go get somebody via the transfer portal?" And he was like, "No, I don't need anybody. I feel good with where our depth is." So that speaks to how he feels about those guys in that room. So I look forward to seeing, how he develops those edge guys and how those, some of those guys that have been in the program for quite a bit, do they take that next step with a new coach in the room?
Yeah. You mentioned the transfer portal thing. It also speaks to the fact that, Dabo was not the only person in that room that's like just saying, "We're not going to go and take transfers." Like, he does seek input from his position coaches. Believe it or not, he trusts the judgment of his coaches as well, and that's how he's been so successful.
Right. It's crazy that people like try to allude that like Dabo's just this like dictator walking around Clemson and everybody just got to shut up and do it his way. Like, I don't really think that's how things. Obviously, he has final decision on everything. He's the head coach. Yeah. I mean, clearly. But the fact that you think that those interactions that I just mentioned, like him going to Chris Rump and like, "Hey, you just lost somebody. Do we need to go get somebody? Do you think we need somebody?" And him saying no. The fact that people don't think those interactions are happening is crazy to me. Yeah. Of course he went to Chris Rum's like, "Hey, you need somebody? We'll go get them," right?
Like, and that's like, why would which is why the narrative, and I don't want to get too far off topic, but that's why it frustrates me so sometimes when, especially from the outside, people paint this narrative that Dabo like handcuffs his coaches. Like, that's no. I mean, I don't. The guys like, and Chris Rump talked about how much he loves working for Dabo and just like the people that he's always surrounded with. working for Clemson, and the texts and phone calls he gets from his other colleagues within the coaching business that hate their jobs, and then they talk about, it's like, man, if let me know if a spot opens up, like, and put in a good word for me, because I'd love to work at Clemson. Like, the opinion of Dabo Swinney within the coaching, within the coaching sphere, and the opinion about Dabo Swinney on the outside are really, really different. It's always interesting and amusing, because like Dabo is well respected within the coaching realm, and obviously he's the object of the public ire on the outside. So
it seems to
that's
be
kind of the reality.
Vastly different situations. And I thought, like you mentioned it, I thought it was very interesting that Chris Rump talked about, the quality of life of a coach at Clemson University, right? And how Dabo runs his calendar, and how, it frees up time for those guys, and they actually can have a life, and, they're not spending every single day hating their life. And I think it started from a question from a media member that was saying, it's kind of interesting that you moved from the NFL to college when so many people are moving from college to the NFL because of, all the stuff the college coaches have to deal with right now. And that's kind of how he got into the fact that, he knows coaches around college football all over the place that, literally hate their jobs. And they're probably doing it just because they're making so much money, is kind of what he alluded to. And, it couldn't be further different than at Clemson, right? Like, it's just a different style. And they asked him for an example, and he gave the recruiting example. Well, some of these colleges just go offer, 200-300, individuals. And he's like, how do you recruit that many people? It's impossible, right? Versus Clemson, where they offer a very small amount of people. So obviously, as a coach, that makes it more manageable on you, right? If you're at the defensive edge coach or the defensive line coach, and you're only, having to communicate with 5 different players as far as recruiting, that's much easier than, dealing with 20 or, how many ever players that these other coaches at different universities are going to. So I do think it's interesting of the difference of opinion between coaches, and then obviously the media of Dabo Swinney. But we'll leave that there. We also heard from Mike Reed. I want to hit on Mike Reed. Love Mike Reed, man. He's such a good coach. He just produces these dudes. And one of the media members asked him about, guys that he has that have produced early on in their career that, didn't have the star ratings and all of this stuff, and, what he thought about that. And he talked about how, his evaluation is important. And the big thing that he looks at is a guy that just wants to put his head down and work. Guys that are willing to go to extremes when it comes to working, right? And he said he values that more than the flashy ratings. Not that he doesn't look at ratings, but he looks more at the character of that person and how hard are they willing to work for what they want. And I thought that was interesting because of his track record of producing these defensive backs and how successful he has been.
Absolutely. There's not really much more that can be said about Mike Reed and what he's been to this program. It's always impressive just, listening to him talk about his philosophy on coaching and all that. He really is one of the keys of why Clemson, has had the success they've had, and doesn't get a whole lot of love, really doesn't get a whole lot of love nationally. Like, every time I listen to, these media types talk about like the best, defensive back coaches in the sport. Mike Reed will get like a passing mention, but I think Clemson has, one of the top 5, top 3 best in the sport. And he doesn't get that kind of love nationally for whatever reason.
I'm
probably
glad
because he doesn't always recruit the big time 5-star.
Yeah, I'm glad. Keep Mike Reed's name out your mouth. Don't talk about him. Just leave.
The coaching world knows the college football, he turns down jobs every single year.
I know. Just leave him over at us. Clemson, pay him whatever he needs. If he needs
I
to
mean,
play where
Kirby Smart wanted him. I mean,
I know he
that was
did.
his first choice.
I know he did.
Yeah, so
We got to keep. Yeah, we got to keep him in the ranks, man. We can't afford to lose a guy like Mike Reed. That'd be a tough replacement. And that's part of why I think Clemson's coaching staff the continuity stays so stable, right? It's such a stable coaching staff because of the lifestyle that they have and because of the calendar and the importance that Dabo puts on family time and doing things like that. So obviously, Chris Rump alluded to Nick Eason getting calls all the time and having to turn down jobs all the time as well. So there's a lot of people coming after that Clemson coaching staff, but luckily we get to keep them together. At least we try our best, and hopefully we continue to do that. But let's end with the two coordinators, right? You heard what Garrett Riley had to say. Obviously, he talked to the media about the overall offense, talked a little bit about Cade. We've already talked through that, but he talked about how he definitely sees this offense being a little bit more productive this year, a little bit more aggressive, have a faster start, I think is the way it was put. And just talked about some of the personnel that they have available this year that they didn't have last year, and how things are shaping up. So what were your thoughts on what Garrett Riley had to say and kind of his outlook heading into fall camp and into this 2024 season?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have the sense that he's just extremely driven, and I think he, as much as anybody, was not happy with how things played out last year, and how he felt, how there were things that they wanted to do that they felt like they couldn't do, and I think that's just been his number one priority is being the offense that they were supposed to be last year, and being having everything at his disposal that he wanted to be able to have at his disposal. And I think that was one of that was the thing that most stood out to me. It just, this is an important year for him.
Absolutely.
Like he's talked about kind of, and one thing that I've always respected about him is, when he's talked about how, fielding other jobs, and, how, he has a timeline for himself personally from a career standpoint about, where he wants to be, but he's always he believes in the Dabo mantra of being great where your feet are. And he says, this is where I'm at, and I want to be great here. And so I thought that was one of the things that stood out to me, and because people have talked about, so man, how long is he going to stay here? And last season, notwithstanding, how does the interest from the outside really influence how he's going about things? But I feel like he's 100% committed to putting this team in the best position to succeed offensively this year, and he wants that more than anybody, because he is these coaches are prideful. Every football coach at this level has a lot of pride, and offensive coaches in general, especially, are very, very prideful human beings. And so I know that last year there were a lot of things that, especially when he talked about going back, and it was a trip, just doing film review throughout the off season, and then going back and watching things. It was a wild ride. And he's like, you could tell that there was so much that he wished he had back, and how he doesn't want to repeat those same things this year. So, I think Garrett Riley is coming into 2024 focused on getting this offense, getting Cade, getting the receivers, everything together, and really putting this team in the best position to be the offense that I think the potential says they should be.
Yeah, I mean, the pieces look to be coming together nicely. Now we got to see it on the field, right? That's where that cautious optimism comes in. That's where, you want to believe in everything you're hearing right now, because you can see the personnel, you can see the coaching changes that have been made, which makes you want to believe. But then you got that voice in the back of your head that's like, I don't know, it ain't worked out in a couple of years, right?
Yeah.
So all the pieces look to be coming together nicely, like I said. But again, it's got to be put together on the field, and we get to find out real quick week one against, Georgia. Dabo talked about, the importance of that game with obviously playing the best team in the country, has been the best team in the country for probably 3 years now. And, the importance of being playoff ready, play one, game one, right? Is I think what he said. And, that's going to be important. But then also realizing that, hey, if you win the game, you
still got to win next. You still got to win the next one. Yeah.
Right. And if you lose the game, don't let it beat you twice, right? Type of deal. So don't crumble just because you go out there and get beat by Georgia, whether that be by 3 points or whether that be by, 23 points. Whatever the case may be, you got to keep your head down. And I think Clemson's not a team that would crumble. We've seen them the past 2 seasons very uncomfortably, and unfortunately for us as Clemson fans, we've had to watch them lose some games and then have to rebound. But they seem to always circle the wagons and get it back on track like they did last season. After losing 4 games, they rattled off 5 straight wins, right? So I don't think that's got to be a huge worry for us, but we'll see how the Georgia game plays out. It's going to be a huge game. It's going to be tough. That's not easy. That's a tough draw, game one. So we'll see how it goes. But we also, last coach we'll hit on, we heard from good Lord, slipped my mind again.
You thinking of Wes? You thinking
of Wes Goodwin? Thank you.
Okay.
Good Lord. I'm going to get it together, guys. I promise. Last guy we're going to talk about, keep all these names together in my mind. Wes Goodwin, we heard from him. He obviously talked about the linebacker group, the group that he coaches, and how pivotal it was to get a Barrett Carter back, a Wade Woodaz stepping into that Mike linebacker role, and how that's going to be a real test for him, but that he's definitely capable of doing that. Talked about Sammy Brown and his development and kind of how he's progressing mentally, about not trying to give him too much, because, again, a lot goes into being a linebacker at Clemson. There's a lot of assignments, maybe a little bit more simplified than in the Brent Venables days, but still a complicated position with a lot to know. So giving him small bites to digest, but obviously he's probably going to be on the field a significant amount this season. And then overall, the defense, he talked about just creating consistency, right? Building off of a very good product that they put on the field last season, building off of that and continuing to become consistent as far as a whole along the defensive side of the ball. So what were your thoughts on what he had to say and where this defense stands heading into fall camp?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's excited about this group, and he understands. I think one of the things that has impressed me about Wes is just he's never been satisfied with anything anything that they've accomplished. He has always been like, okay, we need to do more, and we should have been better here last year, and we need to be better this year. Like you mentioned earlier in the show about kind of how the red zone defense wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great either. Teams got, it was hard for teams to get to the red zone, but once they got there, they had a little bit more success than they would have liked. So being better at that. Another thing that they didn't do particularly well was they gave up some explosive plays in the run game. That wasn't a ton, but it happened a little bit more often than they would have liked, because at times they weren't where they wanted to be from a size perspective on the edge, and they just got caught napping a little bit too often. The Miami game stands out. There were a couple big plays in that game. Notre Dame broke off some chunk runs. Yeah. There were multiple points during the Kentucky. So I think that's one thing that they wanted to be better at, and as good as they were a top 5 defense in basically every metric, besides points per game, because of some unfortunate turnover luck. So they were an elite defense, but Wes was not in, especially from the improvement from 2022 to 2023. A lot of coaches would say, man, okay, I'm really happy with where things are. But I think that's one thing that Wes has done is he's continued to grow, and that's something we haven't really talked about a ton. This is his third ever season being a defensive coordinator, and
It's crazy.
he's already fielded a top 5 defense in year 2.
That's insane, man. Shout out to him, dude. And he's a driven guy, right? Like he's very driven. He's very, you know, I guess nonchalant is probably not the best way to put it, but just like, you know, very
In
unassuming.
interviews, like he's not like he doesn't strike you as like a guy that's like overly intense or really
Right.
super.
Yeah.
But then like behind the scenes, like it's like the guy is relentless.
Yeah. You see him in interviews, and then you see what he produces on the field, and you're like, man,
Yeah.
this dude is legit. And at this point, it's not, you know, you could say initially, oh, he's living off of Brent Venables, you know, recruits and all this stuff. This is 100% Wes Goodwin's defense, and he is doing a really good job of. I mean, I can't think of a harder situation to roll in to being a first-time defensive coordinator, first-time play caller along the defensive side of the ball, and you're replacing a guy like Brent Venables, probably one of the, if not the best defensive minds in college football. That's a tough order. That's a tall task. And, you know, Wes Goodwin has done it probably as good as anyone you could have hired to do it.
Absolutely. And so I'm really excited about this defense. Have a lot. Then this is a really good opportunity because you mentioned, you know, he had a lot of Brent Venables recruits his first 2 years, and now you know this defense. A lot of it is guys that he's brought in now at this point. You know, you still got your Barrett Carters. You know, DeMonte Capehart obviously is a Venables recruit, but Peter Woods and T.J. Parker, Shelton Lewis, and Avion Terrell, Kylan Griffin. Wade Woodette. Like we can go down through the list. Like this is Wes's. You know, this is Wes's defense essentially now.
Yeah.
And so I'm really excited to see what he does with the pieces he has because I think they've done continue to do a really good job at evaluation. You know, just in general on that side of the ball. I mean, there's obviously things that could have been improved that needed to be improved that I think they took the steps to improve. But I mean, you have to like what you have as far as the veteran leadership on this defense and the young talent that still, you know, still is yet to reach their full potential. So, you know, I'm really excited about West, and that's the one, you know, coordinator promotion that people were really skeptical about. You know, when it happened. Well, I mean, I can't say that people weren't skeptical about Brandon Streeter, but West certainly had the bigger shoes to fill, and the most pressure, I think, from just kind of who he was following, and I think, you know, he's not Brent Venables, and that shouldn't be the expectation, but I think he's growing into his own as a play caller and as a coach, and I'm excited to see what he looks like in year 3.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. And I think that wraps it up for our Clemson Media Day segment. The banner here. All right, we are 2.5 hours in already, Jordan. Been a long show already. Thank you guys for showing up. 31 people in the live chat right now. Appreciate you guys for being in here. Make sure you hit that like button if you have not already, and consider subscribing. Me and Jordan do this show every Friday at 5:30 p.m. The All In Show. Appreciate all your guys' support and showing up every single week. Jordan, do you want to do any questions, or you want to go ahead and wrap the show up here?
Man, I know we spent like a huge segment talking. Yeah, well, I know you spent a huge segment talking. We can take a couple and then get on out of here, but
all right.
won't be an extended. That definitely won't be an extended listener questions segment tonight. So let's hit on a few. I know I saw you start some, so we can hit on a couple of those. Let's see. Tig says, I have no worry about the defense. My concern is the O-line. That's Clemson's main shortcoming. I mean, that certainly has been over the last, forever since, Dabo has been the head coach, and really just it's been a theme throughout Clemson's history. They have not produced a ton of offensive linemen, and they haven't had a ton of great offensive lines. They've had guys here or there in years where they've had really good production, but the NFL, the high end NFL talent wasn't really there. So, that's what you bring in a guy like Matt Luke for. Absolutely. John says, I thought, in reference to Bryce Davis, he says, I thought Davis was just too late to commit to UGA. Clemson is his second option. I wouldn't say it's his, I wouldn't frame it like that. It was very clear that Georgia was the perceived front runner. But I do think that certainly the way that the pieces fell in Georgia's class, and kind of where they were kind of prioritizing that, him being in the class was less and less likely of an option, and that certainly played into Clemson's favor. But I didn't feel like Clemson was out of it, even when Georgia was, still very much, is still, fully planned on having him in the class. So I wouldn't frame it like that, because again, his recruitment has been really fluid, and he's, at different points, he's really liked all of his suitors. I mean, particularly Clemson, Georgia, and Duke. They've been the three mainstays. I think that's ultimately who it'll be. And I think he likes South Carolina, but I never felt like they were going to really make enough ground there to really be a major player. So I mean, at this point, I really do think it's Clemson or Duke. That's kind of how I feel right now. And I think Clemson has the edge right now, heading into his commitment. So we will see what happens, because certainly more surprising things have happened. So I am not discounting it going the other direction, of course. But I really do like where Clemson sits. John also says, yeah, there really aren't any bad coaches left. Spiller's already keeper. Grisham will likely do the same with so much talent this year. Finally, Richardson has improved the tight end slowly. Yeah, and what Kyle Richardson has done with the tight end room has certainly flown under the radar. I mean, we've talked about how excited we are about this tight end room, not just for this year, but the future. And he's been the mastermind behind that, and he's just kind of been there doing his thing from a recruiting standpoint. And that's not really something that we were sure about when he was hired, because he just had very limited experience. And he had spent most of his time in the high school ranks. Okay, so how is he going to come in to a big time program like Clemson and recruit and get the tight end room to a place that we don't typically have it at? And he's done a good job and brought in some really talented football players. Kyle Richardson, another guy, especially from a recruiting standpoint, I think is definitely deserves his flowers. And like you said, the staff is in a much different place than it was in 2021. Like it's night and day. So that should be really exciting. Really 2022, I should say, because you still have Brent Venables in 21. All right, one more. Jackson says 43 more days until kickoff of the 2024 Clemson football season. Yes, absolutely. We are approaching there fast and in a hurry. And these shows have done have done me a great service as far as helping the time pass by. So, Jackson, thank you once again. You always do a great job. A resident moderator and one of the ambassadors of the Voice of College Football YouTube network.
That's right.
So keep doing what you're doing, man. Great friend of the show. And thank you for tuning in tonight. And I think that is a good place to close us off. Tiggs also backing him up. Absolutely.
That's right.
thank you guys once again for tuning in. Sorry, we went a little bit long today because I had to pop in late. I was on I had a 3.5 hour drive before this, and I was thinking I was going to make it before the show started, and it didn't end up working out that way. So thank you guys for being patient. TPC, thank you for holding it down.
Absolutely, man. Anytime.
Returning the favor. So I appreciate that. And we'll definitely be back, hopefully, to a normal show where both of us are here at the same time next week. I know it's been an abnormal past few weeks as far as shows, but we promise we're going to be consistent. The 5:30 time slot really is a good time for both of us on Fridays. So, this week, the past couple of weeks have just kind of been freak occurrences, but we don't anticipate that in the future. So make sure to keep your eyes tuned when we schedule the show. 5:30 Fridays at Fridays at 5:30. So we will do better.
Absolutely, guys. We'll try to become more consistent. Stuff comes up all the time, though, so you never know. But we'll always bring you a great show, regardless of what time it is. You guys don't have to worry about that. But we'll be back here next Friday, 5:30 p.m. Don't forget, if you haven't already, hit that like button on your way out. If you're new here, first time watching, or first few times watching, consider subscribing. Me and Jordan do the All In Show here every Friday. We also post videos throughout the week as well of clips of our show. So consider hanging out with us permanently. We appreciate every single one of you. Your guys' participation on this channel and your contributions do not go unnoticed. So thank you very much. But until next time, I'm Tiger Paul Craven. He's Jordan Bowman. Go Tigers.
Later, y'all.